Welcome to Getting Started, Module 2, Law and Money, Part 2, Money. Money is a socially powerful and necessary illusion, an idea. Its very existence rests on the relationship between each of its users. The purpose of this module is to identify areas where government and banks are controlling and manipulating us, to identify alternative systems, to provide enough material to encourage you to do your own research, to provide a tool to have conversations with family and friends about the convention's process. Our ultimate goal is to seat a constitutional government. A crash course in economics, this is not, but in order to create conversation, some basic understanding of terms needs to be established as well as agreed upon. We have become inured to the illegal regime changing the meaning of words to manipulate us. So that's why I say that we have to agree upon the definition as a place to start. Let's have a look at the way we use money, or its function. A medium of exchange can be any object that is generally accepted as a form of payment. It can be considered as a contract between users. The use of money as a medium of exchange has made it easier to exchange goods and services for the time invested in producing them, as well as simplifying the way of exchanging products. A unit of account provides a means for keeping track of how much something is worth. It's a standard of measure that can be used and counted. It is also a standard of relative worth or comparative measure. For money to function as a unit of account, it must be divisible into smaller units without losing value. It must be fungible, where one unit of account is perceived to be equivalent to any other unit or piece. 1 foot of something is equivalent to an ounce of something else. It must be a specific weight or size to be verifiably countable. To act as a store of value, money must be reliably saved, stored, and retrieved. It must be predictably usable as a medium of exchange when it is retrieved. Additionally, the value of money must remain stable over time. Money can also be used as a standard measure for deferred payment. A standard of deferred payment is an acceptable way to settle debt. It is a unit where debt is denominated. Now that we've defined ways that we use money, let's take a look at the different types of money that there are. Commodity money derives its value from the commodity by which it's made. Fiduciary money includes demand deposits like checking accounts, or real bills where a supplier will allow 30, 60, 90-day courtesy period to receive payment from trusted businesses. Fiat money, or currency, also called legal tender, has value only by the order of the government. It is given value because those who use it believe it has value. The value is not derived from any inherent characteristic. Commercial bank money describes the portion of a currency which is made of book money. Book money means account balances. It is not part of actual currency released by a central bank or monetary authority. It is a debt agreement between a commercial bank and a depositor. It can be bought and sold in the markets. This analogy was taken directly from the Hidden Secrets of Money series by Silver Gold founder Mike Maloney. Stages 1, 2, and 3 are self-explanatory. Stage 4, if it's not already apparent, the banks are using government to rule us, using the grandest of schemes to keep us disillusioned. So they debase currency, finding innovative ways to get people to want more services from the government, as well as aggrandizing the belief that we deserve more, not better, but more. They pay lobbyists to influence the public and the lawmakers both. In stage 5, they generate large amounts of currency and wealth from all sides of the spectrum. Inflation occurs when the currency supply expands, so prices rise to absorb the currency. They create cycles in the economy to generate more debt based currency, and the cycle expands and contracts until, like a balloon, it bursts. But the Federal Reserve shifted the inflation to include the global market. So now the international system is based on the American dollar. More about how they did that in a few minutes. This system is in stage 6 right now and the early mode of stage 7. We are watching the riots on the news, but the narrative the media is propagandizing is an illusion. Nobody wants you to know it's the fiat currency that is collapsing, and the stock markets are clinging to the same illusion our Prime Minister Justine coined. The deficit will look after itself. This is the perfect opportunity for the people in this landmass we call Canada to stand up to exercise our authority. Let's use what we've learned from the past to build something better for our children and grandchildren. It's up to me collectively as a society to see this as a duty to take the steps to create a new system. The first step is to recognize the problem. Hot air by politicians won't fix the systemic corruption. Let's have a look at that systemic problem. Banks lobbied government to create an act to give them a signed blank check that allows them to create currency in an unlimited fashion. Ponzi scheme number 1. Government bonds are glorified IOUs that the government gives to the banks in order to borrow currency, promising to pay the bank back plus interest. Remember, the way government generates income is through taxation. So now we will be paying back that debt with interest, enslaving our children to pay back tomorrow what the government is spending today. The banks charge the government interest on those bonds and use them as a form of collateral. The bank then sells those bonds to an open market, so other banks are buying our debt, all the while generating currency with each transaction. So when you purchase a government bond, you are actually buying government debt. When you deposit currency into your bank account, the bank gets to lend it out. The fractional reserve is a ratio set to allow banks to give loans according to the amount of currency they have on deposit. An example could be a 10% ratio. So let's say you deposit $100 with a fractional reserve ratio of 10%, the bank can now loan $90. That money is redeposited, and the bank can now loan out $90 out of every 100 on every deposit. That money is redeposited and relent repeatedly, creating more currency. This is how currency is created. 92 to 96% of all money created is created by the banking system, not the government. The Bank of Canada Act originally would only allow a bank to loan out a small portion of the money that it had on deposit, and there was practically no interest charged on the loans to the government. That was to lure the provinces into a fake union. That all changed in 1985. Governments since then have been spending far more than they bring in, mostly to give it away to other countries. Deficit spending is the downfall of this government. The Bank of Canada has been eroding the reserve ratio yearly, and now it doesn't need any deposits on hand to generate a loan. Banks pay very little interest to the currency on deposits and savings, yet charge substantial interest to anyone who wants to take out a loan. What is quantitative easing? It starts by raising asset prices. So to put it bluntly, that bond that used to be valued at 50,000 is now reevaluated to be worth 150,000. I'm not sure who is in charge of the reevaluation of assets, but even this step doesn't seem quite right. But we see it happening every year with our land tax, mill rate, and property assessments. This now generates more liquidity. A homeowner now feels they are wealthier and can sell that home with a profit, only to buy another home with an inflated value. But now mortgages increase as well. Can you see the debt rising by quantitative easing? It is totally unrecoverable debt, recirculated complete with a new name and a new market to gamble this debt away. This is the simplified version. As a last resort, in desperation, they created even more complicated trading tools in the markets where the banks hedge their bets. The trading vehicles are very sophisticated, and the average person has to take courses in order to learn the rules of the game. The black hole they have created is going to swallow them up. Know this: there has never in history been a successful currency system. Greed always trumps sound money principles. We are entering a global fiasco under the guise of COVID-19. A huge misconception in today's society is that currency is money. We go to secondary school to learn how to manage currency, including finance, investments, and banking. We have two generations of people who have gone to school to learn the principles of manipulating currency rather than the sound principles of money. The Bank of Canada created currency, which was designed as a way to deceive us into accepting its federal authority. It also led us to believe the following: that paper is valuable according to the denomination written on it, that paper was worth its gold equivalent, that banks serve our best interest, and taxation is a benefit to the nation. We have believed the word nation to mean us. I am now going to redefine nation according to the illegal regime's definition. This new definition of nation is the Privy Council, their cohorts, the Bank of Canada, the de facto government of Canada. We are not part of their definition of nation. In order to maintain the central control of the resources, the federal powers that be used the crashed economy to protect their interests. Sound familiar? Under the guise of the drought in the dirty 30s, the de facto government needed to rein in the newly acquired provincial powers that the 1931 Statute of Westminster gave the provinces. So, the de facto did what the de facto government does. In 1934, it created an act under royal decree. The Bank of Canada Act, July 3, 1934, created the Bank of Canada 1935 in response to the 1933 Royal Commission of Banking and Currency. If you remember from Module 1, the Statute of Westminster gave the provinces the authority to create their own laws and their own money system. You have to wonder about this. The Dominion of Canada ended. There is no Governor General. There's no monarch. There's no constitution. Was this really done on behalf of the people? The laws and rules of the Canadian economic system have been evolving yearly, eroding our common sense, morality, and dealings with each other as individuals. The Bank of Canada Act 1985 sold out the Bank of Canada and turned an already bad idea into the biggest fiasco in Canadian history. Now they have a huge debt to an international bank, and we are paying taxes to foot that expense to our detriment and to the bank's profit. It hasn't written the final chapter, but it will very soon. The Bank of Canada has been deceiving us all since its inception in 1934. From the Bank of Canada website, the Bank of Canada is a special type of crown corporation owned by the federal government, but with considerable independence to carry out its responsibilities. For example, the governor and senior deputy governor are appointed by the bank's board of directors with the approval of cabinet, not by the federal government. Who is cabinet if it's not the federal government? The Privy Council also appoints the Bank of Canada's board of directors, but it doesn't tell you that there. You have to go to the board of directors page to see how they become board members. The deputy finance minister sits on the board of directors but has no vote. Yeah, but his brother-in-law does. The bank submits its expenditures to the board of directors. The board of directors is appointed and paid by the Privy Council. No bias there. The federal government departments submit theirs to the Treasury Board. Bank employees are regulated by the bank itself, not by the public service agencies. So the bank's employees get special regulations. The bank's books are audited by external auditors appointed by cabinet on the recommendation of the finance minister. So his brother or his bestie, but not by the auditor general. Having an independent monetary institution allows the separation of the power to spend money from the power to create money. So they want you to believe. Separating the central bank from the political process enables it to adopt the medium and long-term perspectives essential to conducting effective monetary policy. In other words, to baffle you with the BS. Another smoke and mirror show, shuffling the deck to appear independent, but wink, wink. If it isn't already apparent to you, it's clear to me that the Privy Council uses the Bank of Canada to enslave us and the government to rule us. One has to ask, how can exchange standards be set up to succeed rather than fail? The standards or rules applying to commodity money and currency are inherently different, each with its own history and philosophy behind it. The main difference is the standards and rules for commodity money is set by international trade agreements, while the currency standards and rules are set by the governments of the countries issuing the currency. By looking at an example of the gold standard, using it as an example for all commodity money, we can see how it was eroded and manipulated by corrupt governments to satisfy their own agendas. In order to do that, we again have to look at history to teach us a valuable lesson moving forward. This timeline reflects the erosion of standards and also points to the end of that fiat currency scheme. This scheme will end, and it won't be pretty for the majority of the middle class and downright ugly for the people who are reliant on the government for survival. 1861 was the beginning of the global currency scheme. Paper money made trading easier and banks richer. The economy was unstable because of the unpredictable gold finds, but 1870, the gold standard was adopted. The gold standard was a commitment by participating countries to fix the prices of their domestic currency in terms of a specified amount of gold. Domestic money and other forms of money, like bank deposits and notes, were freely converted into gold at the fixed price. Canada and the United States fixed the price of gold at $20.67 per ounce, where it remained until 1933. The Federal Reserve was instituted in 1913 as a ploy by money manipulators who created the financial bank runs and financial panics in order to implement a larger scheme that could control and manipulate an entire country, a central bank. The fixed price of gold was problematic for governments. World War I, most countries abandoned the gold standard in order to print more currency to fund the war. The newly created Federal Reserve intervened in the currency markets and sold bonds to sterilize some of the gold imports that would have otherwise increased the stock of currency. It basically financed both sides of the war. However, after the war, bond yields fell to 3.14%. In 1925, Britain created the Gold Exchange Standard Act, a standard ploy: add a word to make it appear the same, but act totally different. A gold exchange standard is a mixed system consisting of a cross between a reserve currency standard and a gold standard. One key difference is in the system from a gold standard is that the reserve country does not agree to exchange gold for currency with the general public, only with other central banks. Economic thinkers of the day felt that the standard was limiting the growth of the economy rather than the massive overspending for railways built to bring in the gold from California to the East Coast, money manipulators, and financing a war by the Federal Reserve's ability to discount bankers' acceptances, which is a fancy name for a loan guarantee that works like a post-dated check but can be traded as an investment. In 1933, most countries dropped the gold exchange standard, allowing governments to ramp up currency due to the low bond yields after World War I. So the banks again created the Depression of the 30s in order to generate more debt. Gold and silver imports and exports were suspended and banned, ending the gold standard. However, the Federal Reserve had a master plan that would subjugate the whole world. Unbeknownst to many, it was a master at manipulating currency and markets. The biggest modification of the international agreement is that the gold standard gets the boot for a paper standard. What? What are you saying here? The Bretton Woods Agreement was created in a 1944 conference of all the World War II allied nations. Under this agreement, countries promised that their central banks would maintain fixed exchange rate, but instead of fixing it to the gold, they fixed it to the dollar. The agreement created the World Bank International Monetary Fund, which is a United States-backed organization that would monitor the new system. Now, the Fed can mess with world currency, and these politicians agreed. The problem lies not with the gold standard, which should hold speculation and overspending in check. The problem lies with governments overspending on wars and massive infrastructure alongside the marketplace speculation and the Federal Reserve wanting more control. I talk about the principles of sound money, not because I've practiced them, more so because I wish I hadn't ignored them most of my life. Instead, I favored deficit spending, that fictitious world that I was indoctrinated to believe in and encouraged to use. Professor Fakit published 10 articles entitled The Pillars of Sound Money. You can go to professorfakit.com to read or download the PDFs. I won't get into all that's in those papers, but I will tell you what those pillars are. Number one, the principle of the gold standard. Number two, the principle of free coinage. Number three, the principle of redeemability. Number four, the principle of monetary policy. Number five, the principle of fiscal policy. Number six, the principle of no privileges without responsibilities. Principle seven, the principle of liquidity. Number eight, the principle of maturities. Number nine, the principle of productivity of debt. And number 10, the principle of capital and labor. Everything we see and touch, everything that we think is real, is only an agreement. We collectively agree that this is a chair. But if we all agree that it's not really a chair, that it's a mushroom, and we all start calling it a mushroom, our children grow up calling it a mushroom, teaching their children that it's a mushroom. The next thing you know, we are sitting on a mushroom. Money management is a huge industry. Everything from banks to investment firms, all teaching us to use their system, and little or nothing about the principles of sound money, other than how to trick Joe Public into buying paper instead of using tangible commodities. They go out of their way to insist that our everyday shopping will not accept a gold bar in trade for its merchandise. Our employers don't pay us with gold or silver coins. Their papers and their system is the only thing allowed. Does that mean there's no other way? If we collectively agree there's no other way, then for those that believe that, there is no other way. They will never see it until it changes around them. But it also works the other way as well. If we collectively agree that we can find a better way, we will build a new system. Quoting R. Buckminster Fuller, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I would like to thank Doug Force for his unending patience with my unending questions. It's those questions that brought these modules about. By the way, there are no stupid questions. So if you have any, now is the time to ask. Thank you.